Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk about industry book sales in science fiction and fantasy, both the part that industry statistics can tell us about and also the part that statistics from Nielsen, NPD, BookScan, PubTrack, and the American Association of Publishers, AAP, cannot tell us about, the part of the market that they are effectively blind to. But before we do that, let's start with a story. Once upon a time, there were two book genres, both very much beloved by readers, science fiction and fantasy. But after a brief golden age, an all too brief golden age, it came to pass that the popularity of both genres waned. Here we can see plotted adult science fiction and fantasy print unit sales as publicly reported by Nielsen NPD BookScan year by year. From 2006 to 2009, we can see they were on a steady upswing, and then after 2009, they more or less plunge off a cliff, going from 26 million units a year down to about 13 million units a year by 2012, a level that they've stayed more or less steady at ever since. So why did this happen? Well, the story goes that fickle readers abandoned science fiction and fantasy for more serious genres, whatever those might be, or they moved on to getting their fix of science fiction and fantasy from video games, or from Netflix, or abandoned science fiction and fantasy altogether to spend time on social media. The different versions of the story vary a bit, but that in a nutshell is what we hear. Science fiction and fantasy sales fell. Bookstore science fiction and fantasy sections shrank as a consequence, and so did science fiction and fantasy author advances. Now today, there still is a hardcore fan base for science fiction and fantasy, but it's much smaller than it used to be. Science fiction and fantasy authors earn less than ever. Times are tough. So that's the story that industry statistics and publishing professionals have been telling us about science fiction and fantasy book sales for years. And I'm sure you've heard a version or two of this story if you are here at SFWA, but fortunately, that story is flat wrong. So let's take the red pill together and go find out why. We'll go down the rabbit hole of industry book sales together. So before we get started, it is true that after 2009, print sales in science fiction and fantasy fell about twice as hard as print sales in other genres. What we've done here is superimpose in purple the trend for all book sales on top of the trend for just science fiction and fantasy in green and then red. Obviously the scales are quite different, but I've aligned the two at 2009. So science fiction and fantasy sales represent about 1/30 of overall print book sales. And what we can see is that while print book sales overall dropped about 23% between 2009 and 2012, and then recovered half of that, recovered 12% of that back between 2012 and 2017, science fiction and fantasy basically dropped in half. Print sales dropped 50%, and essentially none of it came back. So they continue to be at about half of their 2009 levels. It's also true that science fiction and fantasy print sales, much like print sales in other genres, have now primarily stabilized because 40% of them are now happening online as of 2017, and headed into 2018 it looks much the same. Here what we can see, and we don't have data prior to 2014, but we can see that from 2014 to 2015, the percentage of science fiction and fantasy print sales that was in bookstores continued to shrink, while the percentage that was online, primarily at Amazon.com, continued to grow through 2015, 2016, 2017, from 30% to 35% to most recently 40% for a whole year total, which is a pretty dramatic shift of units from bookstores to online. But as interesting and perhaps even a bit depressing as the collapse of print sales in science fiction and fantasy is, it's far less interesting than what we see happening on the digital side. So to those print sales, here represented in pink, let's go ahead and add ebook sales, only traditionally published ebooks that are tracked by Nielsen PubTrack. And this captures essentially all of the big publishers plus a fair chunk of the medium-sized and some of the small ones, particularly those distributed by Big Five publishers through their distribution wings. And what we can see is that changes the picture quite a bit. Rather than dropping off a cliff, if you aggregate ebook sales along with print sales, we can see the climb continued all the way through 2013 before setting back a little bit. And a lot of folks will be looking at this chart and going, but wait a minute, I thought ebooks were only 20 to 25% of overall sales for traditional publishers. And as a general broad brush assessment, that is very true. However, keep in mind that also includes juvenile books, board books, Dr. Seuss, scholarly nonfiction, the big political books each year, all of which sell very heavily in print and influence the mix towards print. But for narrative fiction, particularly narrative genre fiction, and especially for science fiction and fantasy, what we see is a much higher digital bias. 37% of traditionally published SF&F unit purchases are ebooks. Let's go ahead and also add traditionally published audio sales to that. So here we can see the year-by-year growth in audio. Audio is still a fairly small slice of the pie, but for science fiction and fantasy, it is not as small a slice as it is for many other genres. Almost 15% of traditionally published science fiction and fantasy units purchased are audiobooks, which is a much higher share than a lot of other genres are showing. And it further shifts the story from going off a cliff to continued growth followed by a slow setback after 2013. What we can see here is that with ebooks and audio, traditional publishers are actually selling more science fiction and fantasy unit books than ever before. Okay, perhaps not as many as 2011, 2012, 2014, but still significantly more than in the pre-ebook years, significantly more than at any point prior to 2009. A corollary question might be, which traditional publishers? Has there been any wholesale shift from big publishers down to smaller publishers, micro presses, or is it still largely the large traditional imprints that are selling most of those units? So let's take a look. Here we're going to break down top science fiction and fantasy ebooks that have sold in the last 12 months. This data is current through April of 2018 and looking back to May of 2017. So literally the freshest ebook data in the industry. Here we're basing it on retailer title categorization rather than BISAC code. Basically a book that is found on Amazon or found on Barnes & Noble or the iBookstore under a science fiction and fantasy subgenre will be included here. So if you add up all these totals, you'll find they're slightly higher than the earlier traditionally publishing statistics-based measures of sales, but not hugely more. At the very top of the list, we see Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, the top-selling science fiction and fantasy imprint, which was a little bit of a surprise until we dug deeper. And it's mostly Handmaid's Tale. In fact, almost 40% of it, I believe, was Handmaid's Tale. So there's a takeaway here for authors and publishers. If you can get Netflix to run hour-long ads for your book for months on end, I suggest you do so. The next highest-selling imprint was Tor. Again, not terribly surprising, Macmillan imprint Tor, followed by Del Rey, Ace, and Berkeley, all Penguin Random House imprints. Orbit from Hachette, great imprint. Bantam, a Penguin Random House imprint. Open Road Media, which is a fairly new entrant in publishing, but founded by an executive out of HarperCollins with a focus on bringing great backlist titles to a second life in digital, primarily. Their footprint is mostly digital, and they're doing extremely well in science fiction and fantasy, as well as other genres. So we can see them there. Looks like about number 7 or 8 on the list, followed by Scribner, William Morrow from Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins, respectively. Broadway, another Penguin Random House imprint. St. Martin's from Macmillan, and then Ballantine, Dell, Daw, and Delacourt, all Penguin Random House. Daw puts a warm fuzzy in my heart because I used to come home from garage sales and from the library with stacks and stacks of Daw yellow spined paperbacks. And so it's great to see that they're still in the game decades later. But traditionally published science fiction and fantasy is really only half of the story nowadays. Because traditional publishers aren't the only ones selling lots of science fiction and fantasy ebooks. In fact, if you look here on the right-hand side, in purple, magenta, and pinks, that's different sizes of traditional publishers, their sales. The larger pie slice is what we call non-traditional publishers, self-publishers, Amazon imprints, and the gray uncategorized, which we'll talk about. And you can see that science fiction and fantasy unit sales in ebooks by traditional publishers have become the minority. They command altogether about a third of unit sales industry-wide, with 2/3 not only going to non-traditional publishers, but by consequence not reported in industry statistics, which has consequences, which we'll talk about. But before we do that, let's break apart that pie a little bit more. So here's the breakdown of the last 12 months, ending 3 weeks ago, worth of ebook sales in the US in science fiction and fantasy. So first we're going to look at the traditionally published side. Big five publishers, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Macmillan, Hachette, Simon & Schuster, command 21% of the market. 21% of unit sales were to imprints like the ones we saw listed. Other large publishers, including Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, about 4%. Medium-sized publishers, 2%. Small publishers, 2%. And micropresses, another 2%. Then we move into the non-traditionally published world, where the first category here, with 7% of the market, is Amazon's own publishing imprints. Primarily for science fiction and fantasy, we're talking about 47 North, but there are also a fair number of Thomas and Mercer books that are multiply listed in science fiction and fantasy as well, and other imprints as well sometimes feature into the Amazon publishing pie in SF&F. So that's what the green is. The blue, this is self-published with more than half of all unit sales. These are verified self-publishers. I've gone through one by one, about 10,000 altogether, and look to ensure that these are self-publishers. So we have indie self-publisher collectives with about 3% of the market. Those are self-publishers sharing publishing responsibilities, in some cases marketing responsibilities under an imprint name, but each controlling their own books, their own pricing, branding strategies, etc. With a full quarter of the market next, you have indie self-publishers with their own imprints established, but again, only publishing them or publishing a couple of pen names that they have. Another near quarter of the market, 24%, goes to indie self-publishers who didn't bother to create an imprint at all, or they put in their own name, their own author name, as publisher or imprint when they publish on the retailers that absolutely require that you do list a publisher. And then finally, the uncategorized. So uncategorized single author imprints, these are basically indies, but the lower selling ones who we did not have the patience or inclination to go through tens of thousands and categorize them one by one. There's uncategorized few author imprints, commanding 3% of the market. This is primarily micropresses and some indie collectives. And then finally, 1% goes to uncategorized many author imprints. These are traditional publishers, perhaps ones that sell well in other genres, but their science fiction and fantasy sales are relatively minimal. And that tiny sliver of red, which I don't have labeled, that's specialty publishers. What is a specialty publisher? Well, for the purposes of adult science fiction and fantasy, that's pretty much all Wizards of the Coast. Now, why do we measure science fiction and fantasy market share in units, i.e. number of books sold versus dollars? Well, that's because we're talking about reader mind share here. We're talking about fan acquisition, number of people who have read your book and are recommending it on social media, waiting for your next release in the series to come out. And so reader mindshare is measured not in dollars, it's measured in the number of books bought and much preferably read than just bought and not read. But later on, because publishers care much more about dollars, we will look at those dollars as well and look at the market breakdown by dollars. Although the question does get asked, does it make sense to equate these self-published indie science fiction and fantasy ebooks with traditionally published science fiction and fantasy ebooks at full price, often as high as $12 or $14? I mean, after all, are not the majority of those self-published ebooks pretty much being given away for pennies, 99 cents or whatever? Well, that's a common myth, if you will, but let's find out how true it is by looking at the breakdown of traditionally published and non-traditionally published science fiction and fantasy ebook sales by price points. So first we're going to look at traditional publishing. This upper chart shows the number of units sold last year, again, the last 12 months, May 2017 to April 2018, broken down by price point. And we can see that the vast majority of those land between $8 and $10, or $7.99 to $9.99 more accurately, with a little bit of activity down at the $1.99 and $2.99 price points. And so the average purchase price of a traditionally published science fiction and fantasy ebook last year was $8.04. On the indie side, this is self-published and Amazon imprint published, so I should just say the non-traditionally published side. The average purchase price is $3.20, the bulk of those sales happening between $3 and $5, with a significant but not overwhelming number of units at the 99-cent price point. However, when we move to looking at this in dollar terms, the significance of those lower priced points drops off a little bit. So here we can see traditionally published science fiction and fantasy ebook dollars spent last year by price point. And once again, the majority from $8 to $10, a much smaller share at $1.99 and $2.99. And similarly, when we look at self-published and Amazon imprint published science fiction and fantasy ebooks in dollar terms, we can see that the majority of the action is between $3 and $5. 99 cents moves some units, but not a large percentage of the dollars. And from that, we can conclude that basically $1.99 and $2.99 make particularly good promotional price points for traditional publishers. 99 cents, a good promotional price point for self-publishers, but neither is really generating a significant amount of income directly. Good promotional price points, not great earning price points. It's also worth mentioning, if you notice the orange that makes up a significant chunk of the dollar bar on the self-published side, there's a very small amount of it on the traditional published side. That's Kindle Unlimited payments for page reads. And we can see that science fiction and fantasy self-published authors are bringing in about $30 million a year in aggregate in U.S. subscription revenue from Kindle Unlimited, which makes up about a quarter of non-traditional science fiction and fantasy ebook dollar sales. So it adds some fuel to the perennial dilemma that self-published authors face about whether to be, quote, wide and publish their books on every single retailer and platform they can, or to be narrow, i.e. Amazon exclusive, and take advantage of Kindle Unlimited subscription reads to generate revenue. And as always, there is no correct answer that fits all cases, but it's interesting to see how much of the market is Kindle Unlimited. Another point to make, we're all industry professionals here, breaking the market up into categories that make sense to us, but for readers, they don't see the distinction. Readers don't see separate traditionally published and indie self-published storefronts. They basically see a single unified science fiction and fantasy market that they shop in, where most of the books they purchase cost $3 to $5. The average purchase price across all science fiction and fantasy ebooks purchased last year was $4.43, and that includes traditionally published as well as self-published and Amazon imprint published. Now, to readers and authors, as I said, market share may mean number of books sold, but if you're a publisher, when you say market share, you're talking about dollars. So let's take a look at those science fiction and fantasy ebook dollars. Again, the same pie chart, but this time in dollar terms rather than in unit sales terms. And the first thing we notice is that the traditionally published side in pink and purple now comprises the majority of dollar sales. Big Five publishers, while being only 21% of the unit sales purchases, are 41% of the dollar purchases. Other large publishers, I think, were 4% of units, are 7% of dollars. And then medium, small, and micro presses collectively make up about 6% of the dollar science fiction and fantasy ebook market. Amazon publishing imprints, with their slightly lower prices than other traditional publishers, make up 5% rather than 7% of the dollar market. And self-published authors collectives make up 2% of the dollar purchases, 18% go to indie self-publishers who have their own imprints, and another 15% of the dollars American consumers spend on science fiction and fantasy ebooks go to indie self-publishers without imprints. It's still a fairly significant chunk, 40% of the market when you add up those percentages. 35%, and then another 5% for Amazon, but not as overwhelming. Then we have the uncategorized, which you won't dwell on, collectively adding up to 5% of the dollars. So what we can see is that self-publishers as a cohort, as a collective group, make up a huge share of the dollars that consumers spend on science fiction and fantasy books. But isn't it also true that there are far more self-published authors than science fiction and fantasy authors that are traditionally published? And so the question that many ask is, so collectively that's a lot of money, but are individual self-publishers each doing pretty poor relative to traditionally published authors, and their mass sales only look big because there are so many of them combined? Well, it turns out when you have the data, that's a relatively easy question to answer. This is for that same 12-month period, the last 12 months ending 3 weeks ago, the count of authors who sold at least one science fiction and fantasy ebook in the United States market, or in the United States retail stores. And what we see is 7,152 traditionally published science fiction and fantasy authors, 18,334 indie self-published science fiction and fantasy authors, and then another 500 authors who are published by an Amazon imprint, and their book was in a science fiction or fantasy category or subcategory. So there's roughly 2.5 times as many self-published authors as traditionally published ones in SF&F, and they're selling twice the units. So on a per author basis, there's really not a tremendous difference in the number of books sold. We can also see when we look at, and by the way, this is data that you will not be able to see anywhere else, because this is not a snapshot. This represents daily collection for 12 months of sales data across the board in science fiction and fantasy. And then we're looking here at dollar sales. So how much consumers spent on books by these individual authors determine where they rank in this list over that 12-month period. So for the top 100, we can see 60 traditionally published and 31 indie self-published. Oddly, including number 1, the top-selling science fiction and fantasy author in ebooks in raw dollar terms is a self-published author, which is pretty mind-blowing when you consider that their sales are being compared on a dollar-by-dollar basis against the ebook sales of the biggest names in science fiction and fantasy that you know, the Brandon Sandersons, the Ernest Clines. So it's a pretty remarkable achievement, but then again, that author in particular has a much larger number of titles in the market, so it's less amazing once you take that into consideration. However, once you move below the top 250, we start to see more self-published authors earning in the top 500, earning in the top 1,000 than traditionally published authors. And I shouldn't say earning, I should say selling in raw dollar terms, because of the next point. Okay, so publishers care about dollar market share overall. Authors care about dollar royalty share. Hey, it's great that my book is priced at $17.99. What percent am I getting? How many of those dollars actually mean I can refinance my house? And so, here we go. So when we basically separate the portion that goes to the author from the portion that goes to the publisher, and this is based on a 25% royalty for the big 5 and for the largest of the publishers, and then a 50% royalty to author for the micro presses and the small publishers. What we see is a very different picture. Remove the publisher share, and that's what the author is looking at in terms of take-home income. And that pie chart splits quite differently. Just look at the volume, if you will, on the blue side in author royalty dollars generated by self-published science fiction and fantasy versus on the purple side, traditionally published royalties generated by science fiction and fantasy sales. So this may sort of explain a little bit of that story that we keep hearing about science fiction and fantasy sales, and how well, once upon a time, but now they're fading, and author incomes, times are tough. Two different worlds, some divergence happening, and you can see it very clearly in this picture, where all of the blue dollars are essentially going into self-published science fiction and fantasy author pockets, and all of the purple and magenta and pink dollars are going into traditionally published author pockets. So, little dichotomy there. What's interesting also is to look at how things have trended in terms of what books are selling. Front list versus back list versus deep backlist. So these are terms of art in the industry. In general, front list is the last 12 months worth of published releases. Recent backlist is the 2 years or 3 years prior to that. And then deep backlist is anything older. And so what we see is most traditionally published science fiction and fantasy that's sold in the past 12 months by traditional publishers was in fact deep backlist titles. On reflection, this shouldn't really confuse anybody, because think of the fantastic backlists that traditional publishers have. The same books that we grew up loving and reading, and all those authors, many of whom are still active and writing, appear over there in the deep backlist section. Self-publishing, on the other hand, we can see that almost all of the sales on the non-traditional side are front list and recent backlist. And it's perhaps not surprising, because there really is no deep backlist yet for self-publishing. So a very interesting question, if you look at the slide on the right, left? Right, you're right. It sort of raises the question, what will happen 10 years from now as the non-traditionally published deep backlist has begun to fill in? Are we going to see the pattern match all the way down? You can see the traditionally published sales side looks like a scaled down version of the self-published side right up until about 2009, and then it goes up when the non-traditionally published side basically fades away, because there were no deep backlist titles in the non-traditionally published catalog. When that fills in, will we see something that looks a little bit more like this speculative picture on the blue side? Don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Let's break down science fiction and fantasy sales by subgenre now. And this is something, because it's one thing to throw them all into one great big basket, but what applies to one subgenre of fantasy may not at all apply to a different subgenre of science fiction. So we'll do science fiction first. Here are unit sales by science fiction subgenre. Again, categorized by where the retailer puts it in the browse categories versus whatever BISAC code was assigned. I apologize for the small size of the font. But what we can see is the #1 top-selling science fiction subgenre is military sci-fi. #2 is sci-fi adventure. #3 is post-apocalyptic, and #4 is dystopian. And #5 is space opera. So what makes this more interesting is when we fade in what percentage of each subgenre comes from each type of publisher, or what percentage of the sales of each subgenre is self-published versus traditionally published versus Amazon imprint published. And so once we do that, we can see that in subgenres, traditional publishers own a lot more of the bar. In other subgenres, self-publishers own a lot more of the bar. And in fact, a clearer way to see this is to expand all the bars to 100%. And so you can see percentages across the top here from 10%, 20%, all the way up to 100% for each subgenre. The key is at the bottom. It's a little bit hard to read, but just remember, purple is Big Five. Various magentas and pinks are different sizes of traditional publisher. Green is Amazon's imprints, in this case 47 North for the most part, and Thomas and Mercer, et cetera. And then blue are the various categorizations of self-publisher. And so we can look at which genres are dominated by self-publishing to a disproportional degree. We see military sci-fi at the top of the list. The highest selling subgenre of science fiction is actually almost 90% self-published, only 10%. So This might represent an opportunity for traditional publishers. I know half of the self-published folks in this audience are going, shut up, shut up. Alien invasion, genetic engineering, and galactic empire are also subgenres of science fiction where traditional publishers comprise a disproportionately small share of sales. And LGBT and colonization. So, on the other hand, these are the genres where self-publishers underperform compared to traditional publishers. We have dystopian, we have time travel, we have, oh, this one's a big surprise, classics. How about TV, movie, video game adaptations? Again, not terribly surprising to see self-publishing not well represented in that genre. And short stories. Short stories in science fiction are almost all traditionally published, we can see. In fact, there might be a tiny little sliver of blue in there, but if there is, yeah, it's dinky. And we could take a look at the same for fantasy. So here are fantasy ebook unit sales for the last 12 months broken down by subgenre. And what we can see is paranormal and urban by a mile. Paranormal and urban fantasy at about 11 million units, it looks like, or 11.5 million units, is the top-selling genre of fantasy. It's almost a factor of 2 greater than epic fantasy, which is the next. Epic fantasy is significantly larger at about 7 million units than swords and sorcery, followed by coming of age, and romantic fantasy rounds out the top 5. Superimposing on this the publisher type breakdown, we can see again the same pattern where some genres are strongly traditionally publishing dominated, others strongly self-publishing dominated. And so we'll go ahead and expand that out to 100% for each of those, keeping in mind at the top of the list you have the highest selling genres, and on our way to the bottom, progressively lower selling genres. I mentioned Wizards of the Coast. See the red? That's the Wizards of the Coast and their ebook entries. Dragons and mythical creatures, again, nothing surprising here. Action adventure, TV, movie, video game adaptations, and a little bit of epic and sword and sorcery are all places where Wizards of the Coast plays. Beyond that, we can bring in the fantasy subgenres where traditional publishers underperform on a relative basis. And so we have the top one, paranormal and urban, where they make up about 20% of unit sales, and coming of age, where they make up about 10%, new adult and college, superhero and myths and legends, metaphysics and visionary, and Christian fantasy, which is again down near the bottom of the list, a relatively small genre, but one that is almost entirely self-publishing dominated. On the other hand, historical fantasy, self-publishers underperform on a relative basis. They also underperform in action adventure, TV, movie, and video game adaptations, no surprise there, classics, and in a turnaround from science fiction, military fantasy is an area where self-publishers underperform relative to traditional publishers, as well as humorous and alternate history. So I know there's so much here in terms of data density. Rest assured, we're going to figure out a way to make this available to everybody.
And the flip side of it, where you're not boxing a category, everybody's performing at about their market share. Is that right?
By definition, yes. Absolutely. Of course, we can over-focus as industry professionals on what this means for publishers, for authors, for agents, when in fact we all owe our livelihood to readers.
So I had a question on the previous one. When you grab romantic fantasy, is that only where fantasy is the primary category as opposed to like when it's romance and then fantasy subgenre?
So what we actually end up doing is we take things that are listed in multiple categories, and we play partial credit games. So something that is listed in, and there are some books out there that are listed in 5 different primary categories, we put 20% of the units of each, of that book into each category. So something that is romance and urban fantasy will get half credit. So it's a little bit of mechanics, but it allows us not to duplicate so that we're not double reporting, basically. And it also makes it a lot easier for us to combine data that's browse category based with industry BISAC code based data. So readers are the main drivers here. And so let's look at what happens when we add all these non-traditional ebook sales to the picture painted of traditional ebook sales and traditional print sales and traditional audio sales by industry statistics. And I don't know, that gives me the warm fuzzies. That's readers. That's readers reading science fiction and fantasy. It's almost exactly the opposite of the picture we get of bookstores shrinking their SF&F sections even relative to the rest of the books they sell. The fact is, science fiction and fantasy is a genre like romance that has gone digital, very fast. And when you count all of the digital sales that are really happening, we see it looks like science fiction and fantasy sales have basically doubled since 2006. Which begs some interesting questions. Who are these readers? Are these new readers? Folks who didn't read science fiction and fantasy before, but now do? Or are they the same old readers who can now read twice as much as they used to? Are these folks who used to, like me, go to garage sales and sort of bring in, I triggered it, go to garage sales and bring in boxes of those DAW yellow spine paperbacks? Or are they library readers? We don't know. The data really doesn't tell us. All it tells us is that science fiction and fantasy readership has basically doubled, and it's being underreported by a factor of 2 in industry statistics, leading to a very distorted pictures. In other words, it's telling us that science fiction and fantasy readers love SF&F more than twice as much as the industry thinks they do. You know, but then again, that's good news. If you're in this room, I probably don't have to tell you that. You know it. Anyway, thank you very much. That's what I have. We can do questions. Thank you.
It's a song, really. Nancy can write down the damn music. She wrote a song about a magician and his wife, and I was terribly into this. And
The 2018 Nebula Awards ceremony will begin in approximately 5 minutes.
To the Nebula Awards. As you take your seats, my job is to introduce you to our Toastmaster this evening. Our Toastmaster is actually an old friend of mine, and he's probably actually an old friend of yours, too. This is Martin B. Robinson. You may know him as Mr. Snuffleupagus. He's also Telly Monster, Slimy the Worm, the Yip Yip Monsters. Yep, yep, yep. He's also Little Shop of Horrors, and that is actually the way that we met, was through Little Shop. But I've known Marty for a really long time at this point, and I'm not going to do that math. But he's always teaching me things about puppetry that relate directly to writing. And I'm going to tell you one thing that he taught me, which was we were doing some monitor work, and he was showing me, the group of us, this technique where you pop in and then you pop back out again. And he was hitting focus and letting us know when he hit the focus and when he didn't. And he'd say, yes, no, yes, a little bit. And then what he said was, the difference between me and you who are learning this is that I can correct fast enough that you don't see it. And that is essentially what writers do. We correct in editing, and that's what editors do. They correct in editing before our audience ever sees it. And that's a wonderful luxury that we as writers have. Marty, however, is about to do stuff for you live, so he does not have that luxury. No pressure, sir. No pressure at all. Please welcome Martin P. Robinson.
All right, this is definitely my crowd. I think there's a reason that I'm a puppeteer, is so I don't have to face angry crowds like this. I'm basically a shy person, and I have to fight it every day, and I face it down, and I kind of live by a little meme that goes through my head, which is the things that I fear the most. Those are the things I should probably be doing, which is why I'm here tonight. But I am jumping out of my skin with excitement to be here. And this is gonna be informal. I don't like, canned speeches. They just sound, well, like something that somebody wrote. I don't know about that. But I've done Little Shop of Horrors. It was a lovely project, and it's kind of science fiction oriented, because it was a carnivorous plant from another planet, and she took over the world. And it was lovely being a part of that project, because the life imitated art with that show, which it started out such a tiny little show in a tiny little theater, and I've run into some people who've seen it, which is astounding, because it was a very short run, that first show. But the show kept going and going and going until it kind of took over the world. It became the largest stock and amateur production pretty much worldwide. And it was, to be a part of it from the start, and then it just kept going, and until she took over everything. I've always kind of thought that she should be added to the pantheon of famous monsters. Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Audrey 2. Can you, yeah. Doing Snuffy is just a lovely thing. I have been your old pal, Mr. Snuffleupagus, for 37 years. I feel I got another 20 years in me where I can hoist that baby up, and because you know how your dad says, son, whatever you do, don't get a job doing heavy lifting. Well, I didn't listen to him, I guess, kind of luckily, but it is heavy lifting. And it's dark, and it's kind of dusty, and you can't be a claustrophobe doing that thing, but I do love it. And as far as an actor, my training is as an actor, and actors kind of climb into other characters' skins. I literally climb into his skin. It's not a metaphor. I'm in there operating him from the inside. I'm the talking half. In case you didn't know. The guy who's been doing the backside for me has been doing it. Yeah, I know. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's been doing it longer than I have. And we have an arrangement about things you do in there and things you don't do in there. Mary gave me an idea. Hold on a second. I know. Just bear with me. She said, "Well, you're going to do Snuffy, aren't you?" And some Muppet folks say, "Oh no, you got to have the puppet on. As the voice by itself doesn't really mean anything." But go with me. If you want to experience kind of the awe and mystery, close your eyes. If you want your childhoods shattered beyond repair, you can keep your eyes open. But just close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Oh, look. Here he comes in. He's coming through the door. There he is. He's coming down the aisle. He is.
Hello, everybody. It's just me, your old pal, Mr. Snuffleupagus. I was waiting in the lobby for my best friend, Bird, and he didn't show up, so I thought I'd come in and see what this shindig was all about. I guess they didn't make a plate for me. Would have been a little big, and I do take up a lot of space. I see many of you do not have your eyes closed. This is a problem. Back when everyone thought I was invisible or Bird's imaginary friend, this was a big problem. But we solved it, and I became a real live Snuffleupagus. Anyway, I'm going to go down now. I'm going to be down in the lobby, just me and my little cup. All right? Bye-bye, everybody. See you around.
I know, it's terrible, cheap. What a thank. My dear friend Mary, you can all talk to her afterwards if this turns out into a fiasco. Thank her. But I want to thank my dear friend Mary, and I realized that I have a room full of friends here, and it's one of those things where, I didn't know you were my friends, and you didn't know maybe that I was your friend. People come to Sesame, and they've been watching us for years. We're working on our 50th season now, and it's it's amazing to have people walk in. Ryan Reynolds comes in, and he starts crying. Sesame Street. I love watching the big stars cry when they come in. And you guys, have been there for me in the same way. My first book from Wrinkle in Time. Is it everyone's first book? And and from there I kind of went on and read. I'm an avid reader of lots of stuff, although I have so much more to read. I have 50 pounds of books in my. I will find the time. And she said we were going to be sitting next to Joe Haldeman. And she says, of course, you read Joe Haldeman. And I said, no. And so she wrote in capital letters, "Read The Forever War now," which I did. And loved it. Thank you, Joe. And was so amazed. I was amazed at the end of that astounding novel, 3,000 years of pointless war, that at the end, he opens up the folder and there's a little written piece of paper from his long lost 250-year dead lover, who says, I'm on a time shuttle. I'm going back and forth, and I'm waiting for you, and hurry up. And that whole novel ended with love. And when I met Gay, I knew why you did that ending. I've always thought of science fiction as the philosophy of our times. I read something recently where it called you our most reliable Cassandras. And I really, really like that one too. The way you guide us and instruct us and bring us, bring me to all these wonderful places and worlds and ideas and ways of thinking far, far from Wisconsin. I thank you all for that. It's such an incredible gift. Because of the reading I've done, I'm a puppet master, but I've read The Puppet Masters. And I know what it's like to put my slimy cold hand on the back of a puppet and and inject my will into it and make it bend to my. So I think of these things. I've kind of known what it feels like to walk with Pearson's puppeteers, which kind of has such a strange idea in Beanie and Cecil was the start of that. But every time I do martial arts, and every time I do a spinning back kick out of nowhere that hits the mark, I think of a Pearson's puppeteer spinning and taking a kazin right in the gut. I cannot help but think that. Every time I see a kitten playing with a ball of yarn, I think of that incredible scene where the subjugated humans have given the kazin kits balls of yarn for their birthday and just sit there trying not to laugh desperately while these kittens play with yarn. Every morning when I make coffee, I think of Clifford Simak's Way Station and the possible uniqueness of coffee in all the universe. I've been places in my life where I know what it's like to want to destroy all life in the universe just to get rid of the frickin' Thrint. Okay, you need to read that one. I'm sorry. Larry Niven, where the heck are you? That and it's got so many others. I know why a frumious bandersnatch would allow itself to be hunted. Okay, and I may dislike the Michelin Man just as much as William Gibson. And my wife and I use the word grok freely. Sometimes to the concern of our daughter's teachers. You look like, oh yeah, the word grok, we understand that. My daughters, by the way, are named Lyra and Ripley. This crowd gets it, right? People always say, oh, Ripley, believe it or not. No, Ripley from the starship Nostromo. And Lyra Balakwa from the Golden Compass. It had to be two warrior princesses. It occurred to me, inviting a puppeteer to a science fiction writers convention has got to be an example of the odd man theory. But then it occurred to me, I don't know if that's a real thing or something I picked up from reading the Andromeda Strain. Anyone answer that? I do not know. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the things I haven't read yet. Mankind has always been, I'm going to talk about mankind now. It's always, they've always been identified as the tool makers. And we know now that that's not wrong, that's not right. Every one of God's creatures, great and small, makes tools, even ants. I love there was a scene in Clifford Simak's The City, where they're just a toss away, where they're walking by an anthill, and in the far future, and every little hole has a little cart next to it. And it was, and every time I go back by an anthill, I think, okay, they haven't got the carts yet. Your tools are dreams and words and ideas, and the things and the places you take us all are just marvelous and so necessary in today's world to have dreamers and visionaries that can take all these incredible ideas and wrap them up in a seeming diversion, something that seems to be just a pastime, but is not. It changes people's lives. And I thank you all so much for that. Puppetry is kind of like that, except we don't use, we have words and ideas and that all thing, but there's always an object. There's always an object between the creator and the audience. It can be a very simple object. It can be just a simple hand. It can be a $40,000 Muppet. It can be Audrey 2. It can be anything that we come up with and think about. I brought an object. Oh God. One thing I like about puppetry is the feedback is a little bit more immediate. I imagine that with your writing is a solitary process, and and then all the rewrites and the drafts, and then the editors, and then the publishing, and then the galleys, and years. I talked to so many people that have got years and years it takes to get these out. This is when you want to tip the camera up and, oh God, I'm on camera? Who didn't tell me? Hello? Hello? Wait a minute, this is formal? You let me show up in a purple turtleneck and no pants? Ugh. We'll talk later. My name is Bohush. It's okay, you can keep his head in there. It's always in the shot anyway. My name is Bohush. That's my name, Bohush. My mother was Czech and my father's an idiot! But I am not a frog, okay? I am cut from the same cloth. This is not a metaphor. I am cut from the same cloth, okay? It's possible in my business, and pieced together, kind of in a Frankensteinian manner. But you will not see the stitches. The stitches are very small and camera ready. You can think of me kind of as like a graft onto this person's arm, or a sleeve, or battle armor, if you will, or an avatar. All those things, they all work. I kind of like to think of him as a graft onto my lower half. I'm kind of or a monster from his id. Yeah, say hi. That's enough. Okay, all right. Okay, there's a bit of a symbiosis that goes on here. We both kind of provide different things to this little symbiotic relationship that's going on here. He provides a certain amount of locomotion, because I am a little lacking in the leg department. And in turn, I provide a brilliant, dominating mind. I do have... No. Please do not say anything. Look at his mouth, everybody. Look at his mouth. Too lazy to learn ventriloquism. Yeah. There's a girl on America's Got Talent that's so much better than you. Why can't she be my puppeteer? Ugh. But here's the thing. If I am a mere puppet. Oh, thank you. Can you answer that? If I am a mere puppet, an object, if you will, and if he is an abject fool, Why do you care? Got you with that one. Okay, it's because of this. Watch this. It's a very simple trick, but very cool. Watch, just watch. Catch that? I'll do it again. Ready? Oh, you ready? You're all refreshed? Good. You see what I did there is I took a breath. And you all watched me take a breath, and the air went in my non-existent nose, down my trachea, which is not there, into my lungs, which do not exist, and replenished my blood supply, which of course is not there either. And yet, I am a living, breathing creature that you are buying. How does this work? There's a wonderful little metaphor that I like, and it's that a puppet is an empty vessel. An empty vessel. Half the soul is provided by the puppeteer, but more importantly, the other half is provided by you. Okay, the audience. So you have provided me with the other half of my soul. So you have an investment in my life because you are working so hard to buy the reality of me, little green bohoosh. You believe that I am, and you can't believe in something and be wrong about it. People can't be wrong. So, in order to make all this mental gyration that you're doing make sense, you believe in me. And I love that. And here's the thing. What does Spider-Man teach us?
With great power comes great responsibility.
With great power, thank you. With great power comes great responsibility. And if we are going to work so hard to have this symbiosis between all of us here, well then, what are we going to do with it? We could wallow in the novelty. We could just, it's a puppet show. Hey kids, it's the wallow in the novelty puppet show. I'm so sorry I did that. No, we're not going to wallow in the novelty. We're going to take this incredible dynamic relationship and we're going to do something useful with it. We are going to teach. We are going to instruct. We are going to show humanity what it means to be human by holding up this strange little crooked mirror. So, in closing, this would be, if we were all holding champagne, this would be the toast part. I pledge that I choose to walk hand in hand with you, my brothers, sisters, and fellow dreamers, walking together, leading humanity gently on a path to a future of our own creation. Sound good? Good. Let's go. Hear, hear. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Telly Monster will be up later. Telly is a loose cannon and really can't be trusted. And it was like pulling teeth to actually get Sesame Workshop to allow me to bring him here. So he'll be up later, and we'll have a little muzzle on him. Because I never really know what I'm going to say when I have him. We're going to start the proceedings now? Good. Michael Capobianco will present the Kevin O'Donnell Jr. Service to SFWA Award.
Well, it may seem like I've become the designated presenter of the Kevin O'Donnell Jr. Award, but this year is special, and I think this is probably hard to say for sure, but this is the most well-deserved of all of the ones we've given so far, and there are quite a few. It's going to a person who has been on the board, who has worked behind the scenes tirelessly, and in some ways, nobody knows about it, or the few who are in the inner circle know about it. Everybody else just may have noticed that things are working much better. I have some numbers to share with you, if I can use my technology here. Meanwhile, let's see if this works. Okay, this person was the Eastern Regional Director of SFWA from 2007 to 2010. He was Treasurer from 2010 to 2014. And he's been the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, from 2014 until this moment. His term should end on June 30th, and then he will take a well-deserved rest, I hope. Now, those are big numbers. I did a quick calculation. I'm pretty sure that's longer than anybody else in the history of SFWA has served on the board. There may be a couple of close calls because the regional directors served 3-year terms, and there were a few. I think the 9 years was the max for that. So to emphasize the change in SFWA, Joe Haldeman earlier at the general meeting pointed out that when he was treasurer in 1972, SFWA's treasury consisted of $1.25, and he needed to spend it to buy a little notebook in which to keep the accounts. And when I became treasurer in 1992, things had changed a little bit. There was a fair amount of money in the treasury, but I took office, and actually it was Joe who talked me into doing it on Jeannie. I don't know if any of you remember Jeannie. And he said at the time, that's no big deal, you don't have to do that much. And I found out very quickly that that was an inaccurate statement. But back then, things were still pretty chaotic. There were times my predecessor had failed to file taxes with the federal taxes. We were incorporated in Massachusetts, and their paperwork had been missing for like 3 years. Fortunately, we managed to recover that, but I learned a lesson. One of the lessons I learned was I could have embezzled the entire treasury, and probably nobody would have known. And so that was when I sort of resolved that maybe SFWA needs to be fixed a bit. But up until, let's see, 2010, when this person, can't name him yet, became treasurer, things started to change rapidly and in ways that were completely unpredictable. If you'd asked me in 2009 what our financial situation would be like, how well ordered our accounts would be, whether our budgetary process was working the way it was, I would have said, the chances of that are infinitesimal, because for 47 years, it's been one disaster after another. But that all changed. And right now we have the smoothest functioning nonprofit accounting system that I could imagine. And it's all because of this person who I will now name, Bud Sparhawk. So could you come on up?
prepared a speech. It's an honor to be, no, excuse me, wrong speech. I look on my term since I came on the board in 2017 as a series of increasingly lengthy stories. I came on to complete a term of Diane Turnchek, who was Eastern Region Director. That was the vignette part under Michael Capobianco, and I think it was something like 6 or 7 months. Then Russell Davis came along, and we got involved in writing the new bylaws and starting the, writing the OPPM, which is still an incompleted task and probably will never be completed. It is never done. It is an open document on there. And that was very much like a short story. I was going to be around for a little while. And then John Scalzi became president. And in 2010, we sat around at a board meeting, and he said, gosh, we need a new treasurer. Who in here would volunteer? And looked at me like everybody else in the board meeting. And I said, well, okay, I'll do it, but only for a couple years. And that part, the novelette, it got to be a novelette length story. And under Stephen Gould, it came, we started building the foundation of what we have today, putting a strong foundation in there, figuring out how to stash the gold, and trying to put something on which would carry us into the future. That did not turn out to be a novella. And looking back on it now, after Cat Rambo's reign of terror, it looks like it's a very long novel, sort of like a fantasy novel, in fact. But at the end, we have established bulwarks, a moat. We've got a dungeon that's full of gold. We've gone through a lot of crises, most of which did not come to the attention of the membership. Thank God. And nobody has found how I paid for my convertible. I gave a long financial report this morning to at the business meeting. When I first did this, it was basically, here's what we have on the operating statement, here's what we've budgeted, and here's what our total asset value was, which was $842,000 at that point. Today I stood up and had to talk for 15 minutes and talk about the grants, and how to add investments, and everything else, and the fact that we are now worth $1.43 million. We have a healthy EMF. We've got a substantial legal fund. We are tranching money forward so that we pay part of the expenses for the next 3 years. So I think we're on a foundation. And the board as a whole is making a good budget that we can live with. And in fact, we might end up with a surplus this year. And we couldn't have done this, I couldn't have done this without the help of almost everybody in this room, and their spouses and those people who aren't in here. Because without the support of the membership, the financial system just won't work. Thank you very much.
Now, Stephen H. Silver will make a special presentation.
Well, I hope everybody's having a good time this weekend. It takes a lot of work to put on a Nebula Award, and we have a lot of people who are local here to Pittsburgh who are not members of the organization, who for the last 2 years have given us their time, their effort, a lot of late nights so that this last year and this year could happen. If you were helping out with the Nebula Awards last year or this year, could you please stand up so that people can recognize you? When SFWA decided that we were going to hold the Nebulas in Pittsburgh, Kate Baker and I were discussing who I wanted to lead the Pittsburgh team, and I immediately said that I wanted Laurie Mann to take point. Laurie, she doesn't know about this. If you look, it's not in your program book. I'm off script right now. No, I added this after I showed you the script.
Oh, wow.
So we would like to thank you. This is a photo-automated map of Venus.
Oh, wow.
Keep it in a bright place because light will cause it to rotate.
Oh, wow.
Do not drop it because dropping it will cause it to not rotate.
Thank you.
So-
That's very
so
nice.
on behalf of SFWA, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you. I hit the mark right.
I want one of those. Barbara Barnett will present the Ray Bradbury Award for Outstanding Dramatic Presentation.
The movies. I love the movies. The nominees are Get Out, written by Jordan Peele. I don't know if I'm supposed to do that. The Good Place, Michael's Gambit, written by Michael Schur. Logan, screenplay by Scott Frank, James Mangold, and Michael Green. The Shape of Water, screenplay by Guillermo del Toro and Vanessa Taylor. Star Wars, The Last Jedi, written by Rian Johnson. And last but not least, Wonder Woman, screenplay by Alan Heinberg. And the winner is, for the Ray Bradbury Award for Outstanding Dramatic Presentation, is Get Out, Jordan Peele. Okay.
I am not Jordan Peele. My name is James Walton, and welcome to Pittsburgh. This is from Mr. Peele. Ray Bradbury's exploration of science fiction utilized what he called a ricochet vision, allowing him to use unique vantage points as a lens into societal issues. Get Out was created in this same spirit. It held a mirror reflecting the insidious realities of racism that weren't being acknowledged. Throughout the writing process, I couldn't predict how this daring narrative would be received, but through your support, it exceeded all expectations and became a global success. I'd like to thank the entire community of science fiction and fantasy writers of America for awarding me this prestigious honor. Your recognition and support means so much to me. I am thrilled to be the recipient of this year's Ray Bradbury Award. Thank you very much.
The Kate Wilhelm Solstice Award is presented to individuals who have made a significant impact on the science fiction and fantasy fields. This year, SFWA will be honoring 2 individuals. Connie Willis will present the first Kate Wilhelm Solstice Award.
Hi, everybody. I unfortunately have to report bad news, and that is that Gardner Dezois, to whom I am giving this wonderful award, is not going to be here this evening. He's in the hospital in Philadelphia. He is there because of fluid on the lungs, moving shortly to rehab I'd say in good spirits, but it's Gardner. So he sounds like Eeyore, but But given the Eeyore thing, he's in very good spirits, and he's getting better, and he's really sorry that he couldn't be here this evening. His son Christopher is here and is going to accept the award for him. But I really wanted to give it to him myself. So one of the fondest memories that I have of Gardner Dozois is of a night at Clarion West when he read the students and me excerpts from stories that he had read and letters that he had gotten when in the early days when he was reading the slush pile from magazines like Worlds of Tomorrow and Galaxy and If, including a number of ones by a writer who confided that he had cleverly changed the name Mars to Cars in his story, and who ended one letter with, "Oh, come on, buy my story. What would it hurt?" Which all of us can relate to, I'm sure. Raise your hands if you have written that letter at some point in your career. Yes. Gardner had us all in stitches that night, quite literally rolling on the floor with laughter. He is, as Michael Swanwick has said, a one-man carnival. He is also one of the most accomplished men in science fiction, and it's literally impossible to name all of his achievements. He served as the editor of Asimov's Science Fiction magazine for 20 years, founded and has been the editor of the year's best science fiction for 35, and has edited and co-edited countless anthologies, from the Good Stuff anthologies to the exclamatory series, Aliens, Sea Serpents, Dinosaurs, and the Future Earth series, and the Dangerous Women series, and Old Mars and Old Venus, and best-selling standalones like Warriors and Galileo's Children and Rogues. And he's won so many awards that he's practically been driven out of his apartment by now. 15 Hugos, 20 Locus Awards for Best Editor, 2 Nebula Awards, a World Fantasy Award, and admission into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. And that's not even counting the awards that the stories he selected for the year's best science fiction anthologies have won, which at last count was a whopping 44 Nebulas, 41 Hugos, 33 Locus Awards, 10 World Fantasy Awards, and 18 Sturgeon Awards. It's also not counting the influence that he's had on the field through his years at Asimov's and his thoughtful essays and books on science fiction, and the number of writers that he has discovered and influenced, which is much too long a list for me to name here, so I won't, except to say that I was one of them. If you remember that slush pile night that I was telling you about, well, the whole time that I was listening and laughing, I was also terrified that he might read some lines from stories that I had submitted to him, and I knew that he was in possession of those stories because he had called one of them to the attention of Jake Jacobson, who then bought it, and there were lots of lines in it that Gardner could definitely have quoted from. It was a great story, really, truly terrible story. A romantic comedy about talking sentient Inca frogs. But it was also my first sale. And so, terrible or not, I get to claim that Gardner Dozois discovered me. Just like he discovered and published whole generations of writers. And he did it all while being an amazing writer himself. Most people don't realize that Gardner was also a really terrific writer. He has written dozens of wonderful short stories. 2 of them, Morning Child and The Peacemaker, were Nebula Award winners, and his novelette Counterfactual won the Sidewise Award for Best Alternative History. But my favorite is Après Moi, about the luckiest man in the world whose luck then abruptly ran out, or maybe it didn't. My criteria for a truly great short story are that 1, I love it when I read it, and 2, I think about it for years afterwards in situations that are totally different than the ones under which I read the story. Après Moi is one of those stories, and I find myself thinking of it more and more in these days of Trump and global warming and threats of nuclear war. You all need to read it right after you have read the list that he gave you earlier in the program. Finally, in listing Gardner's many accomplishments, there's also Gardner's sense of humor. and his raconteur's ability to leave a room in stitches. Besides the infamous night of the slush pile, there was also the night that he was telling us about his days in the Army, writing for Stars and Stripes, writing stories that he referred to as the "do not do this or you will die" stories. And I laughed so hard that I spewed a mouthful of Coca-Cola all over Sheila Williams. And then there was the dinner, and the waiter quit. And I laughed so hard I snorted a piece of lettuce up my nose and nearly died. And then there was the dinner where he decided that we would all be the people from the Algonquin Round Table. And he made me be Edna Ferber, who nobody liked. And he insisted on being Dorothy Parker. And I laughed so hard that, well, you get the idea. Of all Gardner's contributions to the field, I honestly think that his wonderful gift for entertainment may be his best. Writing can be a very grim business, and Gardner's wit and humor have helped almost all of us through times of ups and downs in this field. If he was here tonight, he would already have all of you rolling on the floor and choking on your apple pie, either by sticking Cheetos up his nose or maybe walking a wind-up plastic penis across the podium like I saw him do one time, or just being Gardner. I am so sorry he could not be here tonight, especially for Christopher, who's here to accept the award for his dad. And I'm so sorry Susan couldn't have lived to see this night because she would have been so terribly proud of him. And I'm sorry for myself because I really wanted to present this award to him in person, but if I were, I'd probably be choking on something and doing myself bodily injury. But no matter what the circumstances, I am delighted to present this Solstice Award to one of my very favorite people, Gardner Dozois. This is for you, Stevie. So wonderful to see you. Beautiful. Okay, there you go.
Well, Gardner made me make two promises coming up here today. He said, one, don't plan anything because he hated canned speeches, and two, keep it short because no one really wanted to hear him speak. So I will do my best to honor both of them. I did not prepare anything for it. Keeping it short, I will do my best to do. My dad truly, truly loved what he did. When working for Asimov's, he'd come home often and talk about new writers that he found, new stories that he read. He was so excited when he found something that was new and exciting in a writer that he could kind of mentor and would bring something out or bring something new to the genre. He loved working with the old pros and getting to feel like he had a little bit in making something they did even a little bit better or owning a little ownership in it. He truly loved doing that. When he was putting together his anthologies, for him, it was, we thought of it as work because he'd go and he'd lock himself away and he'd have hundreds and hundreds of stories to read and he'd come out every day happy, which for Gardner, is a rather rare thing because he got to spend the day doing what he truly loved. It wasn't a job for him. It was something he just loved to do. In writing stories, he loved to find the uniqueness and oddness in life and try to bring them out. I could sit here forever. Connie kind of covered all the things, so I don't want to reiterate many of the same points that she said. I am just so proud to be able to represent him. I love him. He's my father, obviously, but I completely and totally respect him for what he's accomplished through his life. I'm going to leave you with one thought that he brought to me and that I hope for all of you. He had said to me, in life, find something you really, really love to do. Find a way to make enough money at it, and then you never have to work a day in your life. Well, Gardner never worked a day in his life, and my hope for all of you is that none of you ever do either. So thank you very much.
James Patrick Kelly will present the second Kate Wilhelm Solstice Award.
I am pleased and honored tonight to introduce my friend Sheila Williams. Sheila Williams grew up in Western Massachusetts, and a young girl caught her passion for science fiction from her dad, Alfred Williams. In fact, when she was 16, he took her to a convention where she chatted with Isaac Asimov. She attended Elmira College, studied at the London School of Economics, and later received her master's degree from Washington University. So, what did Sheila do with all that education? She set her sights on a career in the highly lucrative field of science fiction magazine publishing. She spent most of 1981 pursuing her dream job, which at that time was to be an editorial assistant at Asimov's. However, she was repeatedly told to check back later, keep trying, nothing yet, wait. Still, she persisted. And in 1982, she joined the staff of Asimov's. And from that day to this, that's where she has been. A lifer at one publication. How often does that happen? One of the perks of the new job was that she got to spend time with the good doctor, Isaac Asimov. They struck up a friendship that lasted until Isaac's death. Just 2 years after Sheila started working at Asimov's, her boss, Shauna McCarthy, left, and our other honoree, Gardner Dozois, became editor. For the next 20 years, Sheila and Gardner formed the supergroup that brought Asimov's to glory and helped remake the landscape of science fiction. In 1993, Shauna McCarthy told her young editorial assistant that she should go to Boscone and meet some of Asimov's contributors face to face. The first one she approached was a callow young writer named Jim Kelly. She invited me to lunch on her expense account. Expense accounts. Those were the days. This was Sheila's first editorial lunch. Me, I was way more experienced. It was my second. But that lunch was the first of a lifetime of lunches, dinners, breakfasts, coffees, drinks, and many, many other good times. My wife and I have stayed at Sheila's place in New York, and she and her husband, David Bruce, and her daughters, Irene and Juliet, thank you. I remember. Is Juliet there? No. Have been to visit our house many times in rural New Hampshire. I was sitting next to Sheila both times she won the Hugo Awards. In fact, the second time she was up, I convinced her to write some notes for the acceptance speech during the Hugo ceremony. She was so certain that she wasn't going to win that she intended to get up there and wing it in the unlikely event that she did. Note to my nominee friends out there, winging it, never a good idea at these things unless your name is Martin Robinson. Still time to jot a few thoughts down if you haven't already. Speaking of awards, Sheila is about to win the Solstice Award, which, according to SFWA, was created to acknowledge individuals who have had a significant impact on science fiction and fantasy landscape. So let's briefly consider Sheila's landscaping achievements. First of all, she buys our stories. How many writers out there have appeared in Asimov's hands, please, just so people can see? Sheila has been doing this since 2004 when she succeeded Gardner as editor. And here's something to think about. Sheila reads almost all the slush. No, she reads all the slush herself, which isn't generally the case. So, if you get a rejection from Asimov's, at least you know that the boss has read your story, or at least the first paragraph. Second, she reprints all our stories. Sheila has edited 27 anthologies, either solo or with co-editors like Gardner, Cynthia Manson, or Connie Willis. Third of all, she has welcomed hundreds of new writers into the field. Some of you may not realize that one of the greatest joys of an editor's life is to publish your first story. Because being the first to publish a writer who goes on to have a long career is the gift that keeps on giving. I asked Sheila how many first stories she'd bought, and she sent me a list of 26 talented new writers whose very first stories appeared in Asimov's. Of course, that number doesn't include those writers, many times that number, whose second, third, or fifth story she has bought. But Sheila has gone above and beyond when it comes to welcoming new voices to our field. One of her proudest accomplishments is co-founding in 1993 the Dell Magazine's Award for Undergraduate Excellence in Science Fiction and Fantasy Writing with Rick Wilbur. The award, which includes a cash prize, a featured reading at the International Conference on the Fantastic, and a story conference with Sheila, has provided a turning point in the lives of dozens of college students who have gone on to have careers. Some nominated for the Nebula Award, including one tonight, Laura Donnelly, sitting right there. When I think about all the talented writers, new and old, she has showcased in the storied pages of Asimov's, when I think about how she has been a force for equality and diversity, I am proud of my friend Sheila Williams and grateful. Forgive me for being sentimental, but maybe I am most grateful that she invited me to sit with her in a restaurant at the Sheraton in Boston all those many years ago, and to pick up the check. Sheila Williams.
Thank you. I did not follow Jim's advice tonight, so I'm going to wing it, so bear with me, or Connie's advice either. And Jim has said a lot of what I would even say about myself, but I have so many, I discovered short fiction in many ways through the Science Fiction Book Club. My father would not even, he wouldn't even send back the offer so that we would get every single selection. There were 15 a year, and it would be a novel and a short story collection or anthology. And so I read all those collections, and I just, I didn't really know who the author, I never paid attention, of course, 15 to the author's names, but I love those stories. They really just, that's what I loved. I love short stories. And then we got the Hugo winners by Isaac Asimov, and I discovered there was such a thing as science fiction magazines. And I was about 14 years old, and I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. But I didn't even think I would be the editor. I thought I'll be the editorial assistant and take out the trash, And I was, I couldn't even imagine I would. I went to St. Louis. I got a master's degree in philosophy. My best friend said, if you could change your life, what would you do? And I said, I'd go to New York, and I'd get a job on a science fiction magazine. And so I did. It was a little harder than that, and I never looked back. And it was so wonderful. It was wonderful to work with Isaac for 10 years. He was the most wonderful person. He was so supportive. He had founded the magazine to give young, really his main goal for founding it was that so the beginning authors, emerging authors would have the same opportunity he had had. There were so many fewer magazines by the late 70s when he founded it. I didn't start there then. Than there had been when he was young. And he wanted, and there weren't any online magazines or any such thing, and he wanted places for young people to be published. So that's how he was convinced to found the magazine with Joel Davis. And he really did believe in that. So it was really wonderful to work with him. And after he died, I wanted to find some way to honor his memory, and Rick Wilbur and I hatched. Rick wanted to do something with undergraduates, and at the World Fantasy in Georgia, we came up with the idea of the award, and we founded it in 1993 when I was pregnant with my daughter Irene, who I have to thank. She and her friends are here tonight. They took a road trip this morning from New York City, drove all the way here in They drove here in much too short a time, but they survived. So, you know, you're coming to see your mom. It's like, but anyways, so I've been very proud of the authors, the young authors I've met through the award, and there's been so many talented, like Lara, and so many others. It's really been a joy for me. And that's the one thing I have to say. I am going to echo what Christopher said. I had actually been thinking the same thing, is that here I am. I really appreciate from all of you from SFWA this wonderful award. It's just, it really is so gratifying and fulfilling, but it's so ridiculous to get an award for doing something that I love so much, you know, that I never have had to work a day in my life. And it's just, it's wonderful. I really, you know, thank all of you so much, and I will really treasure this award. So thank you.
Oh, wow.
You left me in the plastic bag! That's not safe! You left a little kid, I'm 5, in a plastic. Don't ever leave your kids in a plastic bag. Okay, that's the lesson here. I'm Telly Monster. I hear that I'm a loose cannon. And so, wait. Does this work? Okay, now everybody close their eyes and make, no. I'm here to give the next award. Let's see if I can read this here. I'm not very good at.
Sorry. Oh, hey.
Oh.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, I think you dropped this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was my battle armor.
Yeah.
It's for going through dimensional holes.
You know,
Who are you?
Well, you know, it occurs to me that we work in the same place, but I've never actually seen you before.
No.
It's weird that we've never been in the same place at the same time
No.
before.
Are you a frog?
No, I am not a frog.
Okay.
I'm cut from the same cloth, but no. Oh, right.
Okay. Okay. So you want to come here and help me read this, because I just grabbed it with my mouth.
Yeah.
Because let me see. It says Bill. I'm just learning to read. Bill Camp.
Spell it out.
This is
There
gonna
you
take
go.
some time. All right.
Bill Campbell.
Yeah, you're better at reading than this.
Okay. The publisher of Rosarium Publishing will present this year's. You know this part though, because you've read her books.
Andre Norton.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard that on Chapter a Day.
Yeah.
I didn't have to read it.
Huh.
Andre Norton Award for.
Good job. Outstanding young adult science fiction or
fantasy.
Yes.
Fantasy. Not. Wait a minute. Science fiction or how come you say SFWA? Isn't it SFWA? I mean, really.
Yeah. No.
I mean, somebody's getting short shrift here.
I think it's, first of all, I think it's SFWA.
SFWA.
Not SFWA.
Sounds like a disease. I'm sorry. It kind of does.
Yeah.
You can get that removed with a little penicillin these days.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Okay, so did we actually read this?
Oh, we did.
Bill Campbell.
Bill Campbell can come up here now.
Bill Campbell, you can come up here now.
Rescue us.
Where are you? Is he even here?
There he is. Oh, thank God.
Come on, Bill. Save us.
There's like no way to follow that. So I have nothing to say except to read this now. So you know the award. The nominees are XO by Fonda Lee. Weave a Circle Round by Kari Marin. The Art of Starving by Sam J. Miller. Calm down, people. No, I'm just kidding. I got one more. No, and Want by Cindy Pong. And the winner is. Oh, was it La La Land? No, just kidding. Thank you. The Art of Starving by Sam J. Miller.
Thank you. Fuck. Martin, that first thing, you believe in me, that fucked me right up. Like, I was crying then, and now I'm gonna continue. So thank you all so much for this. This is amazing. I have a lot of people to thank. I've had this in my pocket for this is my fourth Nebulas, so it's grown a little. Sorry to all the other nominees up ahead in other categories. First of all, I got to thank Seth Fishman, my agent, who believed in this crazy fucking book. It's a thing I have where if there's a microphone, I swear more. And so, 6 days after another agent told me, I think this book is broken, I don't know how it can be fixed, Seth said, yeah, let's go out on submission with it. And then this happened. So thank you for believing in this crazy book. I want to thank my editor, Kristen Pettit at Harper Teen. When I talked to her on the phone, when she was after she had made an offer and while we were considering it, I said, how comfortable are you with the level of F-bombs and gay sex in this young adult book? And she said, I think it has just the right amount of F-bombs and gay sex. I want to thank John Joseph Adams for giving me my first pro sale. I want to thank Charlie Jane Anders and Annalie Newitz for publishing me in Other Magazine a billion years ago. I want to take a moment to shout out how amazingly, magnificently queer this whole ballot is. If we could get a round of applause for that. I want to thank my broodmates in the Clarion class of 2012, including Lara, also nominated tonight. I want to thank the fellow members of Altered Fluid. I want to thank my friends and family. I want to thank my sister Sarah, who was always my first reader. I want to thank my mom, who came, so I'm really happy I won. My mom, who taught me how to write a cover letter at age 12, sending stories to Asimovs. And she's actually no shade on all of y'all because you're amazing, but my mom's the best writer in this room. She's working on a book called How to Be a Widow, which is going to fuck all of you up. And I want to thank my husband. All those metaphors, the wind beneath my wings, the Claire Underwood to my Frank, the Macbeth to my Lady Macbeth. Thank you for giving me so much shit and love and support and affection and most of the art that means the most to me. Battlestar Galactica, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Octavia Butler. He turned me on to, so any chops I have are because of him. And finally, I'm done. I swear. This goes out to my father My father, who after a 7-year fight with cancer, told me, I just want to see you sell a novel before I die. And 24 hours before he passed, we sold The Art of Starving. So thank you. Thank you.
To present this year's Damon Knight Memorial Grand Master Award, Kat Rambo, President of SFWA.
I apologize to all of you who are used to be in jeans and t-shirt. But last year someone said that somewhat sneeringly, well, they don't dress up for the Nebulas anymore. And I was like, very well, challenge accepted. Sadly, I was forbidden to bring the trident component onto stage because it has a laser in it. I am happy to display it afterwards because it is super cool. All right, so let's get serious here. The unicorn lived in a lilac wood, and she lived all alone. So many fantasy writers have followed those words into the unicorn's lilac wood, only to emerge changed, transformed, and inspired to create their own roads into those woods, located somewhere on the borders of Elfland. Peter Sawyer Beagle, born in 1939, grew up in the Bronx. A poem written as a high school senior earned him a Scholastic Art and Writing Award, which got him a scholarship at the University of Pittsburgh, where he received a degree in writing. He spent a year abroad, a process that I highly encourage, and then he went on to a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford. His first book, A Fine and Private Place, was published when he was only 19, followed by a memoir, I See by My Outfit. Other books followed, including The Last Unicorn and The Folk of the Air. Beagle has worn a multiplicity of hats, including screenwriter. He wrote the 1978 Bakshi Lord of the Rings screenplay, as well as a Star Trek The Next Generation screenplay, Sarek. He has edited several anthologies, including co-editing with Joe R. Lansdale and Jacob Weisman. He's also a songwriter and musician, and if you were listening to the music that they played during the banquet, that was Peter's music. In 2005, I also want to mention he's a songwriter and musician. In 2005, a novelette that was a follow-up to The Last Unicorn, Two Hearts, won both a Hugo and Nebula and was a World Fantasy nominee. Among the other awards Peter has received include the Mythopoetic Fantasy Award, Locus Awards, the Inkpot Award for Outstanding Achievement in Science Fiction and Fantasy, the inaugural WSFA Small Press Award, and the World Fantasy Award in 2011 for Lifetime Achievement. His work has been adapted into operas, comic books, and of course, animated movies. This is a very meaningful award for me because Peter is one of my greatest influences, and I know that The Last Unicorn got me through at least one very hard space. Peter, please come up and accept your award.
When I first came to the University of Pittsburgh, I was 16 years old. I am now 79. I don't blame Pittsburgh for that. These things happen. But it's still more than a little bit baffling to me to be here right now. So I'm going to keep it short. I'm not about to drag you down memory lane. Never mind that. I'm going to do two things. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs to you, and I'm going to sing you a song that this could be the last time I sing in public. You never know. I've sung in odd clubs and restaurants over the years, and finally, I'd still rather sing than anything else. That's just the way I want my favorite restaurant where I sang for 12 years. That was an excellent French dinner, $25 a night, and tips if there were tips. And I loved it. Writing's one thing. Writing's what I do. Singing's fun. Music's fun. The two paragraphs I'm going to read you come from a story of mine called Chandai, Chanddail. And they're spoken by Lal Kamsin Kamsa Lal. I don't know if she's my favorite of my own characters, but I worry about her. If I haven't heard from Lal in a while, I get edgy. She's old now, but once she was young, black, fierce, heartbroken, and never supposed to be what she wound up doing. She was meant to be a griot, one of those people who memorize a tribe's history, all of it, all the stories, all the songs, all the happenings, and then to train to somebody else to do it after her, telling the stories just the way they're supposed to be told. But things happened to Lal, as she became, because she had to, a wanderer, an adventurer, on occasion an assassin, and, as she says herself, somebody my mother would not have liked very much. She's old now, and she's back doing what she's supposed to do, telling stories to people who come sometimes a long way to hear them. And she's just finished telling the story of Chandai to what I always imagine as a young man. I don't know why. He may not be at all. He may not be young, but he has come a long way to hear the story. And she says, "So then, have I told you anything you did not know before you came to me? No. Do my old eyes discern something besides attentive cleverness in those eyes of yours? No, do not answer me. What my listeners take away with them on the journey home is their own concern and none of mine. Ah, but I did speak of wisdom, did I not? Very well. In that case, I will tell you the one thing I know for certain. Wisdom is confusion. Wisdom is uncertainty. Wisdom is a heartless trickster healing my heart, my worst enemy drawing pity up out of my lifetime of hating, like sweet water from a foul well. Wisdom is knowing nothing, and not even knowing how you feel about knowing nothing. Wisdom is learning to find joy in bewilderment. At the last, Lal says. That's about everything I know right there. After all these years. And the song I'll sing you is a song I heard in Pittsburgh when I was 17. I don't believe anybody in this room can ever have heard it. Back in the 50s and 60s, networks like NBC, in this case, used to do occasional original musicals. In this particular one, The Adventures of Marco Polo, my old Broadway hero, Alfred Drake, from whom I swear I learned to speak, played Marco. And the music was drawn from Rimsky-Korsakov, my favorite Russian composer. The book, the libretto, was written by a young, largely unknown television writer named Neil Simon. And the lyrics were by somebody you might know, but not as a lyric writer. His name was Edward Eager, and his young adult novels, written in the 50s, are still in print today. I read all of them. But nobody knows how good a lyric writer he was, because every musical he had ever had anything to do with failed. When I knew in college at Pitt, that a new musical with book and lyrics by Edward Eager was opening off-Broadway in New York, I would find a way to get home one way or the other, because I knew if I waited for Christmas or Thanksgiving to get home to New York, it would have closed. This is Marco, an old man now, at the very end of the musical. This is Marco back in Venice, all the adventures behind him, looking out over the harbor, speaking aloud first. Time flies, and love dies, and sailors grow older. And I, Marco Polo, a citizen of the earth, stand looking back now over my shoulder. Is it all over? What was it worth? And I'm going to sing this for somebody who isn't here and never will be, but all the same. Safe at anchor, growing old and rusty, ships may hanker for a farther shore, and looking back at the seas I've crossed, and the fortune won, and what it cost, and the things I learned and the things I lost, sometimes I wonder if some morning I should wake up younger, straighter, stronger, as I was before. Would my own land still be too small? Once again, would the horizon call? Would I gain the world? And I'm sorry. This happens when, I'm sorry, this happens when you're old. Would I gain the world and lose it all? And oh, I wonder, at the ending, would my heart still hunger, seeking farther, wanting even more? Bloody right it would. Bloody right it still does. Thank you.
I know many of you found in your book bags our very special SFWA Grandmaster trading card. And here to give Peter a special version of that is Walter Day.
So I make the trading cards you all have. And to do this, it's really, I just have to explain, Peter, that it's really an expression of my heart, because I don't have like a background in publishing or design, so I just taught myself how to use Photoshop and started designing the cards. And somehow some of them actually came out good. And I'm so honored to do this, because not only have I tried to commemorate the history of the science fiction industry, but also turn it into some sort of vehicle that might be educational, that somewhere someone will learn something from it and be excited about it. And for the people who actually get put on the trading cards, they get quite excited, because it's an old American tradition, trading cards. It started with baseball. In the 1860s, they started making trade cards. But initially, they would put flowers and fish on the back of the cards. Then somebody along the way decided to put baseball players on the cards, and forevermore, they became known as baseball cards.
I have to tell you one thing. I had, as a boy, not baseball cards. I had boxers. Nobody remembers this, but one company put out every heavyweight champion you ever saw, most of the lightweight and middleweights and so on, and I had every one of them until, and we will all recite this story in one chorus, until my mother...
My girlfriend made me throw mine away. So anyway, I'm here to present, you've already seen your trading card, but I'm here to present to you a special thing that I've done as part of I'm sort of in the trading card industry, but I'm doing it completely different from anybody else doing trading cards, because I actually form it into like a world premiere and have an award and have, like this, stuff like this, okay? So that's Peter Beagle's award that I'm presenting to you. And you're on card number 134, by the way. And so you share a legacy with other cards 134 from past years. Like, for instance, War and Spawn was on card 134 back in 1951. And then in 1993, Shaquille O'Neal was on 134. So this makes you like a cousin of Shaquille O'Neal, okay? You and Shaquille are like that, okay? And so essentially, this whole thing of making the cards a special commemoration of history that captures the culture of the time and also the wisdom of people's lives is something I'm very devoted to. So I actually do this in about 2 weeks in Sedalia, Missouri, where we do an official unveiling world premiere of the Scott Joplin trading card. And then the next day I'm in Butler, Missouri, and we unveil, giving it to the mayor, an award like this, the Robert Heinlein card, where the whole community is going to turn out and have a meeting with me. We're going to give them the card. So on behalf of myself and my staff, on behalf of everybody here and everybody who's ever read your stories, and especially on behalf of your cousin Shaquille, I'd like to present to you this award. And if you hang it in the sun, it'll rotate. Okay? But don't drop it. Don't drop it, it'll stop rotating. And here's a three-ring binder of almost the entire collection, which is like 115 cards now. So, and a lot of you people out there should be on cards, but it's just too much work to chase you down. So you should actually be coming to me and help me figure this out, okay? So thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much. And the man who actually did the framing, he got so excited when he found out that his framed work was going to be an award for you, because he loved your stories, 50 years ago now. Isn't that amazing? 50 years ago now, The Last Unicorn was published. That's amazing.
At the moment, I just have to mention this. 50 years ago, when The Last Unicorn came out, also happens to be the anniversary of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign. And when The Last Unicorn came out and was being reviewed, I was living in a plywood shack on the mall in Washington, D.C., covering the story for, of all things, the Saturday Evening Post. And I remember, nobody seems to remember that campaign, except because it's 50 years now. But I remember. I do remember that one. I was sharing that shack with a wonderful man from Grady, Alabama. His name was Mr. Collins Harris. I want to mention him simply because I'm sure he's gone, long gone. But the reason I'm thinking, just now, is that we became very good friends, and I woke up in the night in our shack, one point suddenly hearing Collins crying very quietly. And I sat up and asked, Collins, what's the matter? And he just said, go back to sleep, Pete, it's okay. It's just that thing that comes in the night once in a while. Yeah, I know.
I'm honored to present this to Kat, who will accept these awards on behalf of the the SFWA. I also made an award. There was going to be an image of this thrown up there, but maybe it just is not going to happen. But essentially, there it is. So I made about 5 or 6 copies of the award commemorating the card that is in the card pack that you folks got this weekend for Damon Knight, honoring his amazing, what word do I need? I'll let you choose the words. So essentially, I'm giving about six copies of this for you folks to decide who gets to hang them on the wall. And I've been very honored to be up here again, so thank you, Kat. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So, that's perfect. When you get those cool little cards, Walter is the person behind those, and he has been incredibly generous and kind. And if you are interested in being on a card, you should talk to him, because it's really cool.
Goodness. We would like to take a few moments to remember the members of our community who are no longer with us. Time for a puppet. That's a terrible segue. Hey, everybody. Wait a minute. What? This hand wasn't working before. Hey, it's working pretty good now. This one works. This one works. This one works. That one works. I feel very in touch with my feminine side. I like this hand much better than this hand. I'm complete again. Like Sweeney Todd. My arm is complete. No, it would be terrible. I'm here to tell you about the robotic centerpieces. Look at those things. No, look at them. They're looking right at you. It's kind of creepy. They're looking right at you. And you know what they're saying? You can take me home. You can take me home to your place and I can look at you like a creepy little robot at home. No, they're not creepy. I think I'm going to get one. You see, there's one that looks like Rosie from the Jetsons. I love that one. They're so funny. Anyway, you can take them home, and then you can find them in the Book Depot. The guy's name, let's see, I can read this name. Don Jones. Don Jones, you here? Don Jones, the Robot Man. More robots. Robots are very safe here. We would like to, the Nebula Award for Short Story will be presented by 2000 Nebula winner, Mary A. Terzillo. Are you in the house, Mary? There she is. I'll get out of here.
Hi. I just wanted to make one alternate comment, which is to Jim Kelly, which is that my understanding is it's bad luck to write your speech before the announcement of the award is given. But that's just me. Okay. This is such an amazing group of short stories. I don't know how anybody could choose, but you all did. So the nominees are Fandom for Robots by Veena Jiamin Prasad, Welcome to Your Authentic Indian Experience, TM, by Rebecca Roanhorse. Utopia, LOL, by Jamie Walls. Clearly Lettered in a Mostly Steady Hand by Fran Wild. The Last Novelist, or A Dead Lizard in the Yard, by Matthew Kressel. Carnival 9 by Carolyn M. Yoakum. And the winner is Welcome to Your Authentic Indian Experience by Rebecca Roanhorse.
Okay, so I'm so nervous I might throw up, but I'm gonna try to get through this anyway. Oh my God, you guys are crazy. This is so surreal. Sangika, good evening. We gather tonight on the traditional lands of Iroquois and Algonquin-speaking peoples. Let us never forget those who came before us, those who are still here, and those that will be here when we are gone. Welcome to Your Authentic Indian Experience, trademark, was part of a special issue of Apex magazine, edited by Dr. Amy Sturgis. This story was my first short story. It is a story that may have never been written if Amy didn't solicit it, if Apex magazine didn't dedicate that August issue to Indigenous writers. So thank you to Amy and to Jason Sizemore, the editors. It astounds me to this day, this moment, that so many people love this very indigenous story. A story about the horrors of appropriation and consumerism. And I am honored that you like it. It means everything to me, but it means more to indigenous science fiction and fantasy writers. So let this be a call to all the editors and gatekeepers in this room. Native people are still here. We are writing, and we have stories to tell. Kuda, thank you.
The Nebula Award for Novelette will be presented by Alan Smale.
Good evening, hello. The nominees for Best Novelette are Dirty Old Town by Richard Bowes, Weaponized Math by Jonathan P. Brazy, Wind Will Rove by Sarah Pinsker, A Series of Stakes by Veena G. Min Prasad, A Human Stain by Kelly Robson, and Small Changes Over Long Periods of Time by K.M. Spara. And now I get to break the tension by opening the envelope. I didn't bring a handy thing in my hair, so I'm just going to have to do it the old-fashioned way with my hand. And the Nebula Award for the Best Novelette goes to A Human Stain by Kelly Robson.
Live tweeting this. So I was preparing madly to live tweet the winner and not expecting it to be me. Thank you. Thank you especially to my beautiful wife, Alex. Who has been a professional science fiction writer for over 25 years. And I have been a professional science fiction writer since 2015. And we make it work. That's fine. I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you to my wonderful editor, Ellen Datlow, who put me through 5 rewrites of this story. 5. And if it's a good story, it's because of Ellen Datlow. She truly is a wonderful, wonderful editor. She asks questions. She does not tell you what to do. She just asks really incisive questions that make you realize that your story is shit. My God. Thank you to Irene Gunn and Catherine and Carl and everyone at Tor.com for being really freaking wonderful. And thank you to everyone here. I've been thinking a lot about community lately and what the science fiction, fantasy, and horror community means to me. And what it means to me, the conclusion that I've come to is that it means everything to me. And it has always meant everything to me since I was a small child reading anything I can get my hands on. It means everything to you too. And we see that by the wonderful faces that I see in front of me right now, some of whom are still recovering from surgery. You know who you are.
Why are you here? You're here because you love it so much and because it's so important. Connie, your stories brought me life. Life. Thank you. Thank you. There is no place I'd rather be than in this room with you. I love what you do. I love what you do. Your work is so important to me. My fellow finalists, Jonathan, Vina, Rick, Sarah, and Helen, I love what you do. My work doesn't exist without you. That's community. You are my people. You are my people. Sarah Gailey, I see you. We don't create in a vacuum. It's an ecosystem, and it's only a healthy one if it is diverse and constantly evolving, constantly evolving. We have to evolve, and that's what we are as science fiction writers. We evolve, and we believe in diversity. I love what you do. I love our community, and there is no me. There is no me without you. There is no me without you. Thank you.
The Nebula Award for Novella, presented by Shanna Swenson.
All right, the nominees for Best Novella are River of Teeth by Sarah Gailey, Passing Strange by Ellen Klages, And Then There Were N-1 by Sarah Pensker, Barry's Deal by Lawrence M. Schoen, All Systems Red by Martha Wells, and The Black Tides of Heaven by J.Y. Young. And the Nebula Award for Novella goes to All Systems Red by Martha Wells.
Oh, God. Well, Kelly gave a great speech. I would have to follow that, so. It's okay. This is not something I ever expected to happen. It's been roughly 20 years since the last time I had something appear on a Nebula finalist ballot. In that time, I've had a lot of setbacks, including a 4-year career crash, during which I considered giving up any idea of continuing my writing career. With the help of my agent, I got through that. These past few years, I've felt lucky to still be able to write what I want to write and sell my work, no matter how weird it was. So I really didn't expect this to happen. I especially didn't expect it to happen with a little novella about an angry, sarcastic security android with a rich interior life. I'd like to thank my agent, Jennifer Jackson, who took me on at the lowest point in my career and has never given up on me, despite the fact that I don't ever know what I'm going to write next. I'd also like to thank Michael Curry and my editor Lee Harris, along with Irene Gallo, everyone else at Tor.com, and my excellent cover artist Jamie Jones. And thanks and love to my husband Troyce Wilson for his support through a lot of ups and downs. Thank you.
No, maybe you better take it. The final award of this evening is the Nebula Award for the best novel. Whoa! Yeah! It will be presented by Patrick Rothfuss. Come here. Come here, you. And you thought I looked like a Muppet. I gotta try this. Kind of works, doesn't it?
I've always kind of considered myself at least half Muppet.
Good, good. This is a good thing. Where I come from. Are you ready for this?
I don't know if I'm ready for this.
This is the last one of the evening.
This is, I did not expect this to be the emotional roller coaster it has been.
Yeah. But we can see the light. Yeah, at the end of the tunnel. The horses are running for the barn, and you're gonna want to get this coat cleaned after this. Okay. Sorry.
That's great.
Okay. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for this.
All right. Take it away.
Thanks, Telly. I'd planned on trying to be glib up here. This is my first Nebula. I'll admit it. This is the first time I've been here. And there's something that I say when I'm speaking in front of a group of people that is kind of a joke. I think I stole it from a movie. And I'm going to say it, but this time I'm going to mean it in a way I never did before. That I would rather be with the people in this room than with the finest people in the world. I was flattered to be asked to award this award, but I also was kind of wondering how I could justify being up here. And all I can really come up with is that I can speak with some authority about the fact that it is really hard to write a novel. And all of the nominees this year are better novel writers than me, for the simple fact that they have written a novel. And I would like to say that what we do is not just important in this community to us because we love sci-fi or because we grew up with it, but I really firmly believe that what we do is good for humanity. They've actually shown the only way you can actually scientifically improve human empathy in a person is through the reading of fiction. And empathy is, in my opinion, the most important human characteristic. It is the defining human characteristic. And the more of it we possess as people and as a culture, the better we are. And through writing fiction, and what's closest to my heart, of course, the novel, we are in the process of helping humanity become empathetic. We're hopefully helping people become more like people, better humans. And by we, I mean you, because I did not write a novel. The nominees are Old Man Eyes, Amberlow by, sorry, I'm a little shook up here. I did not expect this to be emotional for me. Lara Elena Donnelly. I'm sorry that it was so obvious that I was trying to get that name right. The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. Spoonbenders by Daryl Gregory. The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. Six Wakes by Muir Lafferty. Jade City by Fonda Lee. And Autonomous by Annalee Newitz. And the winner is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin.
So sorry. I'm accepting on behalf of N.K. Jemisin, who gave me an amazing speech, so I'm really happy I get to read it. My apologies for not attending the ceremony this year, but once again, I'm up to my neck in several deadlines and could not carve out the time. I have been informed by Reddit that I am the current living writer who's been nominated for the most Nebulas without ever winning one. Now that my streak is broken, I will apparently rank somewhere behind Jack McDevitt for most nominations with one win. Awesome. But it's nice to have this chance to finally thank my former editor, Devi Pillai, for editing the first 2 volumes of the Broken Earth series. I can also thank my current editor, Britt Vide, who edited this particular book and did a fine job. Thanks, in fact, go to all members of the Orbit team who've consistently done right by me and my work for 10 years now. Wow, never thought I'd get here, back when I signed my first contract with them in 2008. In addition to the Orbit folks, I very much want to offer thanks to those who provided emotional support while I struggled through one of the most difficult periods of my life in the course of writing this book, when my mother passed away in March of 2017. That includes my family, my friends, coworkers from my former day job, my assistants, and many more whom there's no time to name. I also, of course, offer thanks to the members of SFWA for choosing to honor me with this award. The Broken Earth books are set in a world of painful politics and have encompassed a difficult period of my life. But the message I intended to convey with these books, a message I needed to hear myself say, is fundamentally one of hope and perseverance against injustice. I feel stronger knowing that this message has resonated at least somewhat with my fellow SFWA members, and I hope that all of you are able to find your own motivations to push forward. The future that awaits us need not be dystopian. We can make it better. We must make it better. Thank you and good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome SFWA President Kat Rambo.
Do you want to say laser? Ooh. I'm freaking Kate out because she was just like, you're going to blind people. I wanted to make sure that I said thank you to all the folks that are watching us via live stream. Particularly last year, we had something like 1.5 million Chinese viewers. So I want to give a special shout out to you folks. Thank you for watching. So I want to thank you all for joining us here at this ceremony. I apologize to Pat for not warning him it would be an emotional roller coaster. It is every year. We would like the award recipients to bring their trophies up to the photography area towards the back in order to pose for some pictures. Nominees who did not win this evening, we want you to remain in the room to give your alternate universe acceptance speeches. And now if you don't have one prepared, that's okay. I know some of you are superstitious. You don't do things. Some of you may have. We have already forbidden Sarah Pinsker to do 900 alternate universe speeches. All of the rest of you, you are invited to listen to the speeches, to stop in the book depot and pick up some books or fabulous robots, or head up to the hospitality suite, which is on the 10th floor. And we hope that next year we will, oh, actually, board members, we'd also like to get a picture of you while you're kind of dressed up. Thank you, everyone, for coming. You are now free to go and eat and drink and enjoy. Huzzah!
We have the room up for about 20 more minutes if you alternate.
Okay, let's now.
Okay. Well, what? Oh, yeah, we have the room AV up for about 20 more minutes if you want to do the alternate speeches, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do I need to get over there for board member or is it okay?
It's up to you if you want to be in a board member
You
picture.
can shout for me because Jason's going to tag team to do this.
Okay. Why don't you start it off, have Jason step in for you, run over there, get your picture taken, and then come back in.
Okie dokie.
Okay, great, thanks.
Anybody who is giving an alternate universe speech, if you would like to come closer so that I know who I am announcing, that would be wonderful. It is. It takes a little while because people are sneezing. Hello, and welcome to the Alternate Universe Nebula Awards. I'm going to be hosting with Jason Sanford because I have to run over there for a second. We're going to announce the winners of the Alternate Universe Awards, and they are going to accept in the alternate universe of their choosing.
All right. So we're going to start with the alternate universe here. Norton Award for Outstanding Young Adult Science Fiction. Is Fonda Lee here? EXO by Fonda Lee. You got
Toastmaster before. I can alternate Toastmaster.
Welcome to the alternate nebulas. I am your alternate Toastmaster. In other parallel universes, people that won tonight who were over in the corner having their picture taken did not win. And so we are going to bring up the people who in various parallel universes did win. And we are going to start with with the Norton category, with Cindy Pond. Cindy? In the year 2018, in the city of Pittsburgh, in an alternate universe, Cindy Pond won the Norton Award, and here is her speech.
Well, this is very alternate because I'm not Cindy Pond. But Cindy was kind enough to, or brave enough to entrust her speech with me. Cindy says, "I am honored and humbled to accept this award. I would like to thank Michael Strother, who originally acquired Want and said offhandedly to me one day, maybe we should have a cute Asian boy on the cover." Okay. Many thanks to my editor Jennifer Ung for helping to focus on my book's characters and relationship dynamics to bring it to a new level. You are amazing. My gratitude to the entire Simon Pulse team for being incredibly supportive of this title. Want is a true work of love, as it is a tribute to Taipei, my birth city. It is also my response to every Firefly, Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, and so many others that shamelessly took Asian culture and used it as a backdrop, but failed to ever put an Asian hero front and center. Instead, we are the prostitute, the beggar, the delivery man, the inconsequential extra that is murdered without a second thought. We are silenced, we are erased. Want is my raising a middle finger to all of that. Thank you.
Okay, so the other winner of the Andre Norton Award for Outstanding Young Adult Science Fiction and Fantasy is Weave a Circle Round by Carrie Marin. Come on up. All right. Which, by the way, is an amazing book.
Oh, thank you. This is Fonda Lee's fault. I'm doing it for Fonda, and I'm doing it for Cindy, and I'm doing it for Sam, but he doesn't really count, and I'm doing it for me. And I need to turn my computer on, so just a second. Thank you. It has to recognize my face. It's a computer, and obviously I have not prepared the right. Yes, this is awkward because now my computer is frozen. Just a sec, sorry. Come on, you bastard. We're almost there. We are almost there. Okay. So a few days ago, I performed a song that was actually 4 songs. Each of them is for one of the novels in this category. They are little tiny theme songs. So, these are the Norton books with a ukulele. Welcome to the future. Come try the latest craze. A special suit that lets you breathe and not die in the haze. There's way too much pollution, but fear not for Taipei's. Upper classes will survive. It's great to be alive. I see I was mistaken. You just don't have the dough. You're doomed to be a May and not a privileged suited yo. I hope you will excuse me. I really have to go. Before you start a revolution that's so complex that you end up involved in theft and kidnapping, pretending to be someone you are not so you can turn things upside down despite the fact that you are falling for a girl who represents exactly what you and your friends are trying to upend, which means it will be harder to decide exactly what you want. But how are you to know? I'll tell you a story of teenage love and magical causation. Ignore the bits that are speaking of suicidal ideation. The art of starving is all about skill. It has taken me to the border of life and death, which is awesome, but still, I don't have an eating disorder. I I've got everything under control despite the bursts of rage. Admittedly, hunger is taking its toll. I don't really like it down in this hole. I can read minds, but should that be my goal? It sucks to come of age. There's teenage angst and family fights and organs screaming through the night and people who won't use their brains and marbles and inclined planes and someone's clone just disappeared and Quadovella chance is weird and probably this gayest shark in high school is the very worst. There are poems and bad advice and weave a circle round of thrice. Let's just shift the paradigm. Well, pretty clearly lost in time and slimy things upon the sea. And what is with that little key? Roland is the no, it's Mel, but wait, it's Freddy. What the hell? And damn it, the plot is dense and nothing makes a lot of sense, but that's the point. Congrats, you found the key to weave a circle round. We're all different on the outside. We're all different on the outside, aren't we? We're not different on the inside, but we act like the inside's outside. Serve it human and mastery. To be safe is better than to be free, but the exos lot is to divide. They're too different on the outside. Are we different on the inside? We're all different on the inside, aren't we? If we're different on the outside, isn't it true that the outside's inside? We're all different on the outside. Thank you!
That is a hard act to follow, but the winner for the best short story will have to in this universe. And that person is Matthew Kressel for The Last Novelist, or A Dead Lizard in the Yard.
Does anyone want to come up and sing accompaniment with me? No, I'm just kidding. This is my speech. As Sarah said, very hard acts to follow tonight. The Last Novelist is about pursuing one's art in difficult times, even when it seems no one may be listening. In that sense, in these dark times, all stories that convey truths are a triumph. Vina, Rebecca, Carolyn, Jamie, Fran, your stories conquered me in all the best ways because they were honest, because they were true. Please keep telling your truths. All of you, everyone here, please keep telling your stories. My immense thanks to Ellen Datlow and to everyone at Tor.com who does such consistently amazing work. To Scott Bacall for his stunning piece of art, and if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. To the members of my writers group, Altered Fluid, for their always invaluable feedback, and most of all to my wife, Christine, who supported me wholeheartedly in all my endeavors. And now I'm going to read you the other version, which she asked me not to read, but she's not in the room, so now I'm going to read it, because I really feel this. To my wife, Christine, who has sculpted me like clay from a boy to a man. Thank you.
So we've now traveled to another alternate universe, and the Nebula Award for Best Novelette is presented to Weaponized Math by Jonathan Breezy.
Congratulations. Thank you. This has been a good year for me. Thank you, Kelly. This has been a very good year for me. My books have done very well. I've had nice reviews, and of course, I got involved with LMBPN and Michael Anderle and Craig Martell and Kevin McLaughlin, and I started a novella with Lawrence Schoen. And of course, finally, I got nominated for a Nebula. However, the most important thing that's happened to me as a writer took place this year. For the last 3 years, I've been communicating with a retired British Army sergeant living in the UK, and he would write to me regularly, offering me advice, reading my books, telling me what he thought. He asked me to put a cook in some of my books, so I put a cook in there, named it after him, and it was a nice friendship. And then the emails stopped. And I found out his wife emailed me and said that he had passed away. And I was kind of touched. I missed him. So I said I was going to dedicate my next book to him. About 2 weeks later, his son sent me the eulogy that was read by the vicar at the church at his funeral. It was 6 pages long. It talked about him growing up, his family, serving in the military, and then his very poor health. The last 3 years, all the time he'd been writing to me, he'd been bedridden. He would wake up, reach over, get his laptop, pull it in, and go online. And he was very proud of knowing this American writer who lived in Thailand. I lived in Thailand at the time when I met, but he was very proud of knowing this writer. The last entire page of his eulogy was about me. And so it kind of, it still hits me. I'm just a writer. I just put my little words on the page, and I meet here in Nebula with all the other writers, and I feel cool. I go to Worldcon, I sit on a panel, and everybody comes out and says, wow, that was so cool. We're writers for another reason. We're writers because we touch people. Somehow this guy felt more, because he liked my books, he put me on his eulogy. I'm sorry. This is why we write. We write for the readers. We don't write for the agents. We don't write for the publishers. We don't write for the, we write for the readers. And I just want everyone to remember that. I'm sorry, that's all.
And in this alternate universe, I am very lucky to present the Nebula for Best Novelette to my writing buddy, K.M. Spera, for Small Changes Over Long Periods of Time.
Whoa. Well, this is an alternate universe, so first I would like to thank my husband, Taylor Hansen, our 3 dogs, 2 cats, all the fans. I'm kidding. I did write an alternate universe speech, but I actually want to write the one that I wrote. Oh my God, I started crying and I didn't even win. Okay, but so just deal with this. You know that dream where someone says they're suddenly naked in front of a crowd? That's how I feel right now, standing before a majority cisgender audience, not in the physical sense, since I'm wearing this gorgeous brocade skirt that my friend Alexandra made. But no, I mean that my insides are laid bare before you. My anger and frustration in a world that's stacked against trans and non-binary people. My belief that despite all of it, we are agents for change. Nothing has meant more to me as a writer than the responses from trans readers, especially gay and queer trans men, and I'm so honored that my novelette has touched so many of you. I want to thank this wonderful community, but especially Uncanny Magazine, Michael, Lynn, and Michi, for publishing a novelette I pitched as way over your word count and full of explicit queer sex. Merc Rustad for being the first reader when I was too scared to show an intimate trans story to anyone else. Laura Davey for helping me figure out my vampires. My agent, Jennifer Udden, for her constant support. And my writing besties, Sarah Pinsker and Faith Erline, for their friendship and encouragement. Thank you all.
Okay, the Nebula Award for Best Novella goes to And Then There Were In One by Sarah Pinsker. Thank you. Sorry. Which is an amazing novella. Congratulations.
Fellow Sarah Pinskers, I'm not sure if you realize what you've done in giving me this award at a convention, an award for a story set at a convention in which the murder weapon is a nebula. This is the singularity. You may notice that your hair is growing frizzy. your eyes are getting nearsighted and you feel the increasing itch to just have a guitar in your hands, it's okay, this is normal. More seriously, thank you. I hope you get to the right universe tonight. I have a lot of people to thank. I want to thank Uncanny Magazine for publishing a novella which obliterated their word count and has sent many novellas their way since, even though they don't publish novellas. I want to thank my agent, Kim May Kirtland. I want to thank my wife, Zoo, who is sitting over there very patiently, my writing buddy, Kellen Sparrow, and I hope you all find your way to the correct universe when you go home tonight. But in any case, whichever one it is, I wish you the best of all possible timelines. And while I'm up here, I will announce the Nebula for the world next to mine, which is for Barry's Deal by Lawrence M. Schoen.
This is Barry. Notice that he too has a Nebula nominee pin. Make it a quick one. Oh, okay. Well, before tonight, I was not a believer in the many worlds hypothesis. I have been fortunate enough to. This is my 5th Nebula nomination and my first win. And what has always been amazing is year after year, the ballots keep getting better and better. And so I was sitting at my table and I said, I didn't prepare anything tonight because for previous, and I started talking with the people at my table and they said, well, why didn't you, that almost guarantees it. And I said, well, if you think like that, what guarantees it is my wife wasn't able to come when she'd planned to. And my publisher at the last minute had to cancel out. And then Jim Kelly gets up on stage and says, of course you're going to have your speech prepared. And so that obviously meant that either I was going to win or there was, in fact, the many worlds hypothesis. And as it turns out, both were true. So thank you very much. Everything, as always, to my wife, who is in every universe that I get to inhabit, and that's what makes them special. And to my publisher, Barbara, who couldn't be here, and the members of Noble Fusion, who read variations of this story probably far too many times in far too many worlds. And Barry thanks you too, but he's very shy.
Now, in this alternate universe, we want to make sure we didn't miss anyone. Is there any other finalists who would like to give their speech? No? All right, well, wait.
Also, thank you to Sheila and Asimovs for Wind Will Rove. This is the other universe. And thank you all for sticking around and listening. And to all the finalists, you are all winners in my book because those... Fonda! Wait, hold on. In my defense, Fonda, I thought you said before that... So... Awesome. Jason's going to keep going. I think you are. So come on up. And I'm going to run over there and get a photo. And, all right, sorry.
Do you want the introduction or?
No. I mean, yes. Hey, Jason.
Okay. Yes. So the Andre Norton Award for outstanding.
I don't need to do 2 in a row.
Novel. No, there it is. Okay. The Nebula Award. Well, I'm looking. Where's my? There it is. Okay. The Nebula Award for Best Novel is Jade City by Fonda Lee.
So, I tried and failed many times to write an acceptance speech for tonight because every time I sat down to make the attempt, my mind resisted. And I had this exact conversation, with Kelly and Alex a couple of days ago because they asked me, did you prepare anything? And I said, well, see, so much of what we do as writers in order to remain happy is lower expectations. So every time I attempted to even imagine winning, my mind would kind of recoil like a poked clam. And the idea of standing up here and accepting a Nebula Award seemed kind of really excessive, overambitious, or as the Green Bones of KCON would call it, asking for gold and jade together. So the first thing I want to do is acknowledge all the incredible, deserving finalists in the novel category this year. Where are they? Did they all go off to the bar without me? I'm so disappointed. There's Myrrh. Yeah. Okay. Where's Laura? Is Laura here? Is Theodora here? They're gone? Daryl, Annalie, and of course Nora, all amazing, amazing writers. I'm so honored to be on a ballot with you, to be considered in your company. Jade City was an ambitious passion project that I loved with all my heart. I wondered if anyone else would want it. It made me giddy with excitement, it crushed me with self-doubt, and it leveled me up as a writer. When I finished writing it, I printed it out, I read the entire manuscript, and I experienced that most rare and unusual of emotions for a writer, which is I knew it was good. I had no idea if it would be published, but it was what I wanted it to be. And it was destiny that it ended up with Sarah Guan at Orbit. Sarah, I can't thank you enough for loving and championing and bettering Jade City. You are my horn and my weatherman, and I am so excited to continue this journey with you. Thank you, Sarah. And to everyone else at the Orbit team for getting behind this book, Tim Holman for saying yes, Jenny Hill, my editor in the UK, my hardworking publicists and marketing folks, Alex Linsicki, Ellen Wright in the US, Nausea in the UK, everyone in production and sales. It really, really takes a village to get a book to market, as all of you authors know. And I am very, very fortunate to have a damn good one behind me. Thank you to my agent, Jim McCarthy, for believing in my career from the start. To my beta readers and writer friends who read and supported this book. There are way too many of you to name, but you know who you are. And finally, I have to say thank you to my husband. He was my immensely patient husband, Nathan, who's at home with our children. When we got married, I am pretty sure he did not expect me to quit a career in corporate finance to write fantasy novels. But he didn't blink an eye, for which I am eternally grateful. Jade City is a book that I doubt would have been published 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It wasn't, I certainly wasn't remotely good enough as a writer to have pulled it off at that time. But even if I had been, the genre had not yet gone through the enormous bloom that we have seen now in terms of broadening the long accepted definition of what fantasy can be and pushing the boundaries of inclusion and previously unacknowledged voices and the inspiration of different cultures and influences. So no matter what else anyone else tells you, this is the golden age of science fiction and fantasy. We're living in it right now. And I couldn't be more excited and honored to be a part of it. Thank you so much. You're all amazing.
And in this universe, the winner of the Best Novel Nebula is 6 Wakes by Myrtle Lafferty.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So what I want to talk to you about today, and I don't have a lot of time, is the fact that no one will ever teach you how to fucking write an award speech. And this occurred to me today, and I thought, this needs to be addressed. No one tells you how to do this. And then suddenly you write something and you like it and it gets bought and holy shit. And then suddenly it gets award nomination. You're like, what am I going to do now? And they're like, yay, you got an award nomination. What am I going to do now? Well, okay, well, you think your family. And so you got to say, Jim, you are my world and I love you and I could not do this without you and you're awesome. And my daughter, who has run off with a compatriot who is Theodora Goss's daughter, if you see the 2 teenagers around, I would say I'm not responsible, but I'm half responsible, so. What? So, okay, so thank the family. So then we have your agent and your editor, because they will hunt you down and kill you. So thank you to Jen and Davey and Kelly. So, and then you can either get the hell off the stage and make everyone like you, or you can go on about something that's very important to you, that you think, I have you all in my hands, and I'm going to tell you about this thing that I care about. So, this is when you try to be clever, so you're welcome. You can talk about how amazing it is that you got this, or the fact that you can mock all the haters who didn't think you could do it, and you know they're out there. And you can tell a story about words that I did not understand here because my handwriting sucks. And by now your audience will really like you to get the hell off the stage. So you want to talk about the California Vinters, the dark chocolate makers, the milk chocolate makers, the designers of Overwatch, and the designers of Oxygen Not Included, who distracted you but yet gave you sustenance during the writing of this book. Lastly, what I was actually going to say when I got up here, I was halfway crying over there, and I rewrote my speech. I just want to say that what has hit me about this community is that what has built my career is a moment of kindness, here and there. Years and years and years ago, I met Gay Haldeman at a WorldCon, and she said something kind to me, and I thought, I can do this. And then, you know, I met Annalie Newitz at a DragonCon over a decade ago, and she was kind to me. And when I found out we were both nominated for the same award, that was the coolest thing ever, because we were old friends. And you know, Connie Willis, who was my idol, and she was kind to me. And like in 2006, I got an email from a man named James Patrick Kelly, who listened to my podcast and said I was doing a good job. And since then, he has become my mentor and his moment of kindness. And wow, my handwriting really sucks. And Fran and Andrea and Scalzi and Corey and David Anthony Durham, Mary Robinette Kowell, who will advise me in anything. Is she even here? No, she's not. She's worked very hard tonight. But Mary Robinette Kowell will make sure that my dress is straight, that the name tag is gone, that everything looks good before the camera goes off, and I have no clue what any of this means. But Mary Robinette Kowell will make sure it looks good. And yes, that is it. That's it. I don't have a clever ending. It is a moment of kindness. That is my TED Talk, so thank you.
All right. I just want to check, did we miss anyone else? Raise your hand. I think we're good. That was a perfect ending. I want to thank you all for sticking around. I love this community too, and I couldn't think of a better ending, so thank you very much for sticking around for the alternate universes in which you all won.
Thank you for joining us for the 2018 Nebula Awards. Join us next year in Los Angeles.